Well, when we come together here at camp, so often the conversations will kind of turn to, oh, do you remember so-and-so? Or, do you remember when we did this? Or, do you remember when we ran, well, some of the things? You should tell me some of the things you remember. Playing in the river. Sana was talking about the kids and Megan. I remember that one time they all came in, they were just mud. Were you with the parents? I was with you didn't win. She should watch her head. So many memories. So many wonderful memories. And we carry those, but today I really want to spend time more looking ahead and not so much time just looking back. Because I think some things are happening within our larger church bodies that are really exciting. And I want to make sure that you know about them, and I'm going to share that with you. One of the first things that I want to share with you was this gathering leaves. This was the 5th time that we've had gathering leaves. And these are women from the different religious denominations or traditions within the Swedenborg Church. And I finally think I got it straight. And I want to help you this morning because this really helped me to understand. So this is my timeline. So in 1688, dear Mr. Swedenborg was born in Sweden. And for the first, I don't know, how many years is that? From 80 to 45. Oh, 57. He was 57. He was a scientist and an engineer. And he worked in the mines. He had this totally scientific mind. He had a lot of inventions. He wrote a lot of scientific books. And then in 1745, he had this dramatic religious experience. And he switched from the scientific to looking at religion. And this was not an easy thing to do. When you think about renowned world scientists today that had built up this amazing reputation for being one of the most intelligent men around, of working in the mines, of building all these things, to have a religious conversion and to switch and to start talking about things that people tend to not agree on or give a lot of credence to, that was a big. So that was in 45, and then in 72, Swedenborg died. And then it was 15 years later, which the General Conference of the New Church in England was founded. So that was the first time there was what we think of as a group of people coming together and forming a church. And it was called, and this is what I think is so confusing, that was called General Conference. And then we come down to when it came across the ocean to America. And in 1817, that's when the General Convention of the New Jerusalem in the United States and Canada, and that's the body that we're a part of, General Convention. The General Conference, of course, is still going on in England. Now, I thought it was interesting, too, because when was the Pawnee Rock, you're celebrating your 125th? I should have put that in here. So 1888. And the Prairie Church is 1887, I believe. We decided it was a year earlier. So right before that, our churches came, and they were breakaways from Mennonite churches, I think, primarily. And then in 1890, the General Church of the New Jerusalem split from General Convention. So General Convention continues, but General Church split, and then in 1930, the Lord's New Church split away. So what this is kind of showing us, and then there are other conventions and conferences. There's one in Australia, there's some in South Africa. Korea is a big place where for some reason our church has really taken on, and so there are ministers and church bodies, so there's more than just this, but this is the one that we that we are a part of. And so in gathering leaves, the women said, we should come together. We shouldn't be always having these separate worship services and things, so let's try and come together. So the first one we got together with women from all 4 of these branches. So people came from England also, and we started looking at how are we the same? Well, we all love the Lord Jesus Christ. We all are trying our best to understand what this Bible is saying. And we were all using Swedenborg's writings to help us understand what it says. We didn't all agree on what we found out from it, but those were the similarities. So the second time we met, we looked at our differences. And that was a little more contentious because one of the big differences between General Convention and General Church that caused the split, or I don't know if it caused the split, but it was part of it, we ordain women and General Church doesn't. So when the women all came together, this was one of the things that we had to deal with. And then the third time we went to England, and Linda was there because we wanted to see where it kind of all started. But this fifth one that we had, we do about every 2 years, so this has been going on for a long time. The women that came together, it was like we were from a family a long lost family. And it wasn't the thing that I think is so interesting, it's not the same women that come together. It's different women every time, and yet we feel that connectedness when they come together. And in fact, this last time, 20% of the women, it was their first time to be there. And yet they still felt that connectedness with one another and the good feeling. In fact, the youngest one that was there was a college student for her first time, and the oldest one was 88 years old, and she was from General Church. So I just, and I'm going to tie this all together, but I think it's so wonderful that is going on. The second development that happened was last October, so this month that just finished, and that was when the Swedenborg House of Studies, which is our seminary, met together in Bernathen, which is the home of the General Church. So we went to them with outstretched hands to get to know them better and to say, hi, here's what we're doing in theological education, and we talked to the dean of the theological school, and we talked to the person that's in charge of the Mars program, and how can we work together to educate the future leaders of our church? Instead of everybody doing it separately, we said, let's try to work together. And even though we ordain women and they don't ordain women, there's still things that we can cooperate with and things we can talk about. And this is really a big thing, because in 1890, when that split happened, you know, it wasn't like just one church went this way and one. Sometimes families were split apart, and it was a difficult time. And I know Eric heard the stories more firsthand than I did, but it wasn't unlike Pretty Prairie and Pawnee Rock, because there too families were split. I know I talked to people and they said, well, this side of the family became a part of the New Jerusalem Church, this part of the family stayed in the Mennonite Church. And it creates difficult feelings, but these two experiences that are happening, I think, at the convention level are a positive sign of bringing it back together. And my prayer is that somehow within Pawnee Rock and Pretty Prairie also we can figure out how to break down, how we can mend some of those walls. Because the Mennonite Church in Pawnee Rock just closed. And they're even going to tear their building down because they don't want vandalism because it's kind of out in the country. So how could we mend fences and bring them in? Well, we've talked about that a lot. We haven't found any ideas. So that's kind of some of the things that... And this brings me to the third point. I'm taking this course from Reverend George Dole, Dr. Reverend George Dole, who many people in our church consider the guru or the patriarch of the church. And he's almost 90 now, and he's still teaching online courses. He has so much wonderful things to share. So what we're studying? Toward a newer church. What do we need to do to break down some of these walls and barriers and bring people together? And what did Swedenborg really mean? Did he mean to start a new church? Or did he mean to bring these teachings into the churches that are already in existence? And another interesting development that I didn't even think about till now, but we have 4 of our trained clergy that are not serving in Swedenborg churches, but are serving in Methodist churches, or United Church of Christ, and I think those 2. But so to me, these are all very positive signs that we're coming together. So what I wanted to do on the back of your bullet, I want to talk about this one particular verse that George Dole just pointed out to us in class. And he said, you know, we're going through this new translation now of all of the writings, and there are a lot more They're easier to read. It's called the New Century Edition. And this is one that he talked about that he hadn't noticed before in the old writings, even though I'm sure he's read it so many times. But it's like fresh news from heaven with Johnny Appleseed. So I want to look at this because this is really has spoken to me. And I want you to help me with it. So I'd like you to read with me, please, the first two sentences. A doctrinal view is united when everyone loves each other or displays charity. Mutual love and charity bring such people together into one despite the variety among them, because it draws unity out of variety. That just blows me away. It derives unity out of variety. To me, what this is saying is we don't have to have just one denomination, one church to agree. We can, if we come together with love and charity and acceptance of differences, then there's only one God, and we can all come together into that God, because we waste so much energy fighting or defending or saying that my way of thinking is better than your way of thinking. When what this is telling me is that God can use this beautiful variety. We don't have to get rid of the differences. All we need to do is to have more love for one another. And that's what we were reading in Isaiah. Did you notice in Isaiah, back in the Old Testament, so this is not new news, right? He says, get rid of the chains that you use to hold others down and stop pointing fingers if they do something wrong. Stop saying harmful things about them. And personally, I have a confession here. I thought about the Calvary Chapel that's across the street from Prairie. And the number of times I have thought negative thoughts about it because they park in our parking spots. And they're meeting over there and they're not paying the expenses of having church. And I think really, I'm kind of mad because they're growing like wildfire and they have these wonderful children's programs and it's bigger. But what this is saying is we shouldn't go around talking bad about them. And I've been just as guilty. I wanted to go to the school board and say, they're parking. We've been here for a long time, 125 years. We don't want them parking in our parking space. But this is saying, no, you come with love. Because that's not going to get us anywhere. I just really like this. Okay, in case you couldn't tell. Let's read the next two lines. It starts when everyone practices charity or loves each other, then no matter how many people there are, even if they number in the hundreds of millions, they share a single goal, the common good, the Lord's kingdom, and the Lord himself. So what does this mean? When everyone practices charity, no matter how many people there are, and I think at Swedenborg's time, thinking of hundreds of millions was probably way out there, Now, how many billion people live in offhand, Gerald? How many people in the world?
About 7 billion.
7 billion. Yeah, so we're kind of past that.
Swedenborg's time, there's probably maybe a million.
Maybe a million. Yeah. So for him to think of when there's going to be 100 million, he's looking way down the future. But so we ask, it says you need to practice charity. You don't just have love, you need to practice love. You need to be useful in our Swedenborgian terminology. So we kind of ask, what does it mean to practice charity? Well, we have the most beautiful answer, I think, of all when we look at the Good Samaritan. And you know the story. You know the Bible story. This man and I think it was probably a Jew, was walking down the road and the robbers came. And they took all his clothes off and they knocked him out and left him there, took all of his money and left him there unconscious. But the story that's so interesting is it says a priest walked by. So it wasn't just anybody, it was somebody that was a leader of the church. And this man's laying on this side of the road. What did he do? He walked on the other side of the road like, maybe if I don't put eyes on him, I don't see him. And how often do we walk by people that need something? And the second person that walked by was a Levite. And that is also, the Levites were the leaders of the church. They were the ones keeping things together. And he did the exact same thing. He walked completely on the other side of the road. But the one that came was the Samaritan. So we often use that Good Samaritan, it's just a term for someone that does good for somebody else. But the Samaritan was from a completely different country, from Samaria. And not only did he stop and dress the wounds and take care of this person, he carried him into an inn and left money so he would be taken care of. And this is Jesus' wonderful parable to us of what it means to practice charity, taking care of our neighbor. It's all there. So let's read the next line, starting variety. Variety in doctrine and worship are again like the variety of senses and organs in the human body, which contribute to the perfection of the whole. Let's see, did I want to go in? Okay, this one. Okay. What I read from Corinthians, did you catch how closely this relates to what we were talking about in Corinthians? You've got to have the variety in the body. We've got to have our eyes and our ears and our feet and our hands, or we couldn't function. And it's the same with it in worship. We need that variety. We're not all going to think alike. We're not all going to believe alike. We're not all going to want to even worship together. But we are all worshiping the same one God. And if we can count in love and charity, that's what we need. And the last two sentences, please. Let's see. When doctrine or worship varies, then the Lord, working by means of charity, affects and acts on each of us in a way uniquely suited to our personality. In this way, He fits each and every one of us into the order of things on earth just as in heaven. Then, as the Lord Himself teaches, His will is done on earth as it is in heaven. Does anything stick out to you there? And I might mention George Dole, when he's teaching us, he always says, you got to read Swedenborg through at least twice before you can sometimes get the meaning. So I've had the opportunity to read this, but the line that sticks out to me here, when doctrine and worship varies, then the Lord, by His love, can come to us in a way uniquely suited to our personality, which to me means even within our tradition, every one of you here, God is coming and knocking on your heart in the way that you can receive God. And even within a husband and wife, Gerald and Karen, it'll be different. Because God is amazing enough that He can come to us in the way that we can receive God. So all this uniqueness and all this variety, that's what makes heaven on earth. Because that's what it's going to be like in heaven. We're not all going to be the same, but we're going to be who we are. And the Lord is there knocking, saying, I'm coming to you. Open up your heart, and I will bring you love and joy and peace and satisfaction. If you open your heart in the way that you can receive it. Be cool, huh? This makes me excited. There's so much future in this for the future of our church and the future of Christianity and the future of people coming together in the way that they can understand the Lord. Amazing. And now we're going to have our offering, and then we're going to share in the communion.